Anyone with a green thumb knows that it takes both skill and patience to make a garden flourish. It also helps to have the proper tools on hand. An avid gardener's arsenal can contain everything from shears, trimmers, and pruners to rakes, hoes, and spades. The handles of these garden tools are made of white ash, a sturdy wood that can withstand the force of shoveling, digging, or raking. These dried ash dowels measure 1/2 meter to 2 meters long, depending on the tool being made. They first enter what's called the chucking line, where specially designed automated machines shape them into handles. The first operation rounds the dowels to the required diameter, 4 centimeters or so, depending on the tool. The next operation cuts the dowels to the required length and profiles their ends. Two chucking heads, one on each side, carve the ends simultaneously. One shapes the bottom of the handle to fit the tool's blade. Certain blades go over the wooden handle while others go into it. For those inserted blades, another chucking head hollows out the handle. Meanwhile, the chucking head on the other side rounds off the top of the handle. The finished handles spin against a sanding belt as they exit the chucking line. This smooths the surface of the wood, preparing the handles for a coat of protective varnish. High-end shovels and spades have what's called a steel D-grip, a steel handle grip with a wooden insert. An automated lathe first shapes a piece of ash to the right length and profile. Then an automated drill pierces a hole. To make the sides of the grip, workers begin with 2 pre-cut pieces of steel called blanks. They place them in a manually operated press that shapes them in a 2-step process. They use the heat of a strong electrical current to melt the steel and fuse the pieces together. This is called resistance welding. Next, they feed a steel rivet through the sides and wooden insert and fasten everything together. Elsewhere in the factory, meanwhile, a heated forming machine stamps out the steel blanks that workers will shape into blades. A robotic arm loads the blanks into an oven. In a mere 4 minutes, the oven heats the steel to almost 1,000 degrees Celsius. This intense heat makes the metal malleable. Workers then take out and shape one blank at a time. They have just a few seconds to form the steel before it cools off. The first press forms the blade, in this case a shovel, and a partial socket. Then the second press closes the socket. They quickly submerge the blade in lukewarm water to cool the metal down. By now, the steel is extremely brittle, so the blades go into what's called a tempering furnace for 15 minutes. This alters the metal's internal structure, restoring its strength. The steel D-grip, meanwhile, has been cleaned and painted. Workers insert the wooden handle and nail the parts together. On the other end, they attach the blade, which by now has been varnished to prevent corrosion. After drilling a hole through both the metal and the wood, they fasten the blade using a rivet if it's a high-end tool, a nail if it's a budget model. These hot-off-the-press garden tools are finally ready to put in a hard day's work. Around 1000 AD, craftsmen began making intricate window designs using lead rather than wood or plaster between pieces of colored glass. Before long, the church was commissioning stained glass windows depicting religious scenes to adorn the great cathedrals of Europe. You can make stained glass two ways. Using copper foil, a technique developed about 100 years ago by the American artist Louis Comfort Tiffany, or you can use the centuries-old European lead technique, which we're about to see. First, the artist lays a plate of glass over a pattern and traces the parts of the design that she'll cut from that plate. Then she scores her trace line using a glass cutter. A quick snap, and the glass separates neatly. She follows the same procedure with different colors and textures of glass for all the pieces of the design. By running the cutter slightly inside the trace line, she leaves room for the strip of lead that will later hold the pieces of glass together. Once she finishes cutting all the pieces, she checks them against the pattern, making sure they fit together properly. Now it's time to assemble the pieces using the pattern as a guide. This zinc molding will frame the panel, its inner groove fitting over the edge of the glass. The artist positions this molding along the perimeter of the pattern. Then she drills an L-shaped wood frame into the work table to hold everything in place during assembly. A few nails keep the molding in place. She'll join the pieces of glass using strips of lead called came. Lead because it's soft enough to bend to the shape of the pieces. After straightening out a long strip of came, she cuts the various lengths she needs to border each piece of glass. The came is shaped in such a way that the glass on each side just slides right under. The cutting pliers, called nippers, are specially designed to slice through the came without deforming it. Once the artist finishes assembling the glass pieces, she pushes everything gently against the wood frame. This squares the panel and ensures the pieces fit together snugly. Now she brushes on flux, a type of acid. This cleans the lead came so that solder will adhere well. Using a soldering iron, she applies a bead of lead and tin solder wherever two strips of lead came join. Then she uses a short bristled brush to coat the lead in black putty. This makes the seams watertight and gives the lead a darker, aged look. Finally, she sprinkles on calcium chloride powder called whiting. This sets the putty and polishes the glass and lead to a shine. After 4 painstaking hours, the panel is finished. More elaborate stained glass works feature hand-painted detailing. The artist first prepares a design on paper, then cuts the pieces of glass accordingly. He paints the design outline on the pieces in black, then fires them in a kiln to set the paint. To create shading, he applies a coat of brown paint called grisaille. Using a dry brush, he removes it from the parts he wants to highlight, then he fires the glass again. Now he paints in the final details and fires the glass for one last time. The paint contains powdered glass, so the intense heat of the kiln bonds it to the glass pieces. The result is nothing short of spectacular.